Hello, morning, Gemma.
Morning. Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me along.
Oh, it's really, really good to have you here. Thanks for everybody who's tuning in, either live or on rewatch. So today's guest is Gemma Casey. I would introduce her, but I'll hand over to you, Gemma. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so my job title is not the most obvious, is it? It doesn't really do what it says on the tin. I'm the ecosystem manager for Wales for Natwest, and basically what that means is that I look after all of Natwest's SME support, so support for small and medium businesses across Wales, and there are counterparts doing that role across the UK. So NatWest has got a really wide range of support for startup businesses and scaling businesses, and that all comes within NatWest's enterprise team, and I look after that in Wales. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. My background's a bit different to that, though. I've had a bit of a squiggly career. So I trained as a journalist. I trained in newspaper journalism and spent a few years on a local newspaper and then with a national news agency before I moved to BBC Wales, where I worked in news and current affairs across both television and radio. Then I moved to work at a university looking after a project which was a pilot in what we would now call hyperlocal media. We didn't even have a word for it when I was looking after it, though. And then from there, I came to NatWest as the regional PR manager. So that's the kind of link between my journalism background and the bank. I came in to look after the PR across Wales and the Southwest. And then a few years ago, I moved sideways into this enterprise support role. And the reason that kind of does fit in my journey is that my background is that I grew up in a family of business people. My dad was running a third generation shop while I was growing up in the South Wales Valleys. So I've grown up around self-employment and business and sort of seen via that the opportunities and the challenges that being in business can bring. And then when I was in the BBC, I specialised in business journalism. So that's kind of the link to this role. What I think this role enables me to do is almost marry the two. So it marries my passion for supporting small businesses with the journalism and communication skills, because a lot of what we do at NatWest is about running events, writing articles, doing things like this. So anything really that helps to get our message across to business owners in terms of the support that's out there and the connection to expertise that we can bring in terms of helping them to start and scale their businesses. So that's a bit about my background.
Thanks. So I met you, Gemma, when I was on the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator in Cardiff. So that's a course that the fully funded course that supports startup businesses and scale up businesses. I've been on that for the last 6 months, and that's where we met. I know that, and this is a particular interest of mine, given that I'm a female entrepreneur, I know that you run a podcast, particularly focused around female entrepreneurs. Do you want to say a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, thanks. Yes. So NatWest, in 2019, we launched a major report called the Rose Review of Female Entrepreneurship, which was written by our now CEO, Alison Rose, and commissioned by the Treasury. And that was looking at the barriers that face women when they start and scale businesses, because, it's no surprise to those of us who work in business support or to female founders like you that unfortunately there are higher barriers for women when they are thinking of starting a business, when they're actually starting out, and also when they're growing their business as well. So the headline of the Rose Review, the main finding, and there were many, but the main standout finding was that if women in the UK started and scaled businesses at the same rate as men, we would see an additional £250 billion added to the economy, which is a really startling figure, isn't it? So there's a massive opportunity if we collectively can support women to start and scale their businesses to the same extent as men. Now, that report came out in 2019 and it is updated every year. So we've just seen the 2023 update. And encouragingly, we are now seeing far more women starting businesses, but there are still barriers. And some of the barriers that the Rose Review highlighted are things like the fact that women tend to be more responsible for caring. So whether that's childcare or caring of elderly relatives, it tends to fall to women more. It also found that women tend to be more risk aware when it comes to debt. And so as a result, they might be far less likely to take on borrowing to grow their business, whereas men would be more likely. That's one of the reasons that male-led businesses tend to grow faster and get bigger. And another one of the barriers that women talked about when they were interviewed for the Rose Review was that they said that there weren't enough relatable role models. So they told us that they just didn't see women like them setting up and scaling up businesses. So we all know people that we see sort of in the news or on TV who are very, very successful business women. But very often these are women who might not feel very relatable. So, you know, they might be running multi-million-pound companies and have several children and maybe sort of charitable commitments and really sort of impressive hobbies. And they kind of feel out of touch. We might admire them, but they don't really feel like us. What women weren't seeing were those stories of other women in their communities, in their neighborhoods, who are actually kind of looking and feeling and sounding like them. So one of the many interventions that Natwest has done is my podcast called Inspiring Women Wales. It's in conjunction with the University of South Wales. And basically, we set that podcast up because we wanted to provide women with those relatable role models. So that does do what it says on the tin. It is all about inspiring women in Wales, but beyond as well, to set up their own business. But it also tells the stories of inspiring business women in Wales. So we've got 2 series so far, 12 episodes across the series. They're short and sharp, so they're 20 minutes each episode. And in each one, I speak to a different female founder about her experiences. So they're really candid. We talk about, you know, the challenges and the ups and downs, as well as the real high points and the reasons that they've gone into business and why they love it. And we cover everything from leaving a corporate career to seeking investment to dealing with a real crisis like the pandemic, to taking on new staff, growing a team, building a culture, everything. And that podcast is on Apple, Spotify and YouTube. And I think you had a listen to some yesterday, didn't you?
I did, yes. I only found out about the podcast yesterday, so I had to listen to a few of them. I really, really enjoyed them, and you're absolutely right in what you say, in that I think that probably was providing me with a little bit of a role model, like where my journey could go. You know, you're right. I enjoy podcasts such as Diary of a CEO. And yes, I might be inspired by the CEO who, I don't know, the female CEO who launched Bumble and is the first billionaire, female billionaire. But that is, that's just a big story that doesn't relate to me in my life. But hearing about those women who are in my local area, not that that really matters, who are talking about all challenges that I feel that I've had as well, was really, really inspiring. And to see that they've overcome things and, building excellent businesses. So that really, really inspired me. So, yeah.
I'm really pleased to hear that, because that's exactly what we set out to do, was so that listeners could feel inspired, hence the name, but also take something away from it as well and feel like they had something that would help them with their next step, or just sort of feel that, yes, that somebody has been there and done that, it is possible. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's really encouraging that you think that. And I think as well, the great thing about the podcast is that to you, something you just said there, it it helps women to start to feel that they are part of something, that they are connected, that there is a network out there. And for me, that's one of the most important things that women and men, but we know women struggle with it more. One of the most important things to do when you're starting and scaling a business is make sure you are surrounded by a support network, and that you are hearing from people who can be a shoulder to cry on, or somebody to listen, or can offer advice. And that's the other gap that the Rose Review highlights, is that women say they don't necessarily have the access to those networks. So the podcasts can give you those virtual networks, and you can listen to those stories. But then we've also got other work going on within Natwest, but also really importantly in the wider ecosystem, working with partners to make sure that we're providing those environments as well for women to come together and do what I call finding your tribe. I think it's so important in business that you've got your tribe, because starting a business is a really lonely place, which I'm sure you would probably agree with. Yeah. And so I, back when I was running the hyperlocal media project for the university, I was part of a project in Blaenau Gwent in South Wales called Effect Blaenau Gwent, which was a business support scheme. And that was based on the principles of the Siroli Institute. And the gentleman who heads up that and who spearheaded the principles behind Effect Blaenau Gwent is Ernesto Siroli. And he's got a fabulous quote that I always come back to when I'm thinking about business support, which is this. He said, "The death of the entrepreneur is solitude." And I think that is so powerful. And it's scarily and sadly quite true, unless we all come together to help business owners to not be on their own and not be in solitude. Because, you know, a lot of people have been used to being in a corporate environment where they'll have a boss, they'll have peers, you know, you have your regular check-ins, you have your reviews, and, you know, much as we all sort of dread that quarterly review or annual appraisal or whatever, it is a touch point. If you go out on your own, suddenly you are cast adrift. And so that's one of the powerful points of the Natwest Accelerator program that you mentioned, Sarah, is that one of the key pillars of the Accelerator program is the regular one-to-one coaching with a business coach. And that's built in there for a reason, because we say that that coach holds a mirror up to the founder, because as you have probably found on occasion, it's sometimes hard to hold yourself accountable, isn't it? And sometimes you need somebody to say, well, that thing you said you were going to do, have you done it? Or just to be a sounding board. And that's where I think it's really important that business owners find their tribe. And there are so many ways of doing that. And they don't have to be your stereotypical networking breakfasts. There are lots of different things available now. And just to give you an example and a little plug for an event I'm involved in, on Friday, April the 21st, Natwest is running a Women in Business event in conjunction with the University of South Wales, Federation of Small Businesses and Darwin Gray Solicitors at Llanech Vineyard, which is in the Vale of Glamorgan near Cardiff, 9:30 to 1. And that is called It's About Time. And it's all themed on resilience. Which is clearly a major topic at the moment. You know, all business owners are having to dig deep and find resilience with the multiple crises that are going on in the economy at the moment. So that event is going to be very much focused on business and personal resilience. And I think that is something that we can offer to business owners, and we do, is the opportunity to come to free events and tap into free workshops. But I would always encourage business owners as well to find their tribe and find their support system, so that you aren't on your own. There is always somebody there who can help.
A lot of the people in the podcast that I listened to were talking about the importance of the networks that they'd almost already established previously in their corporate careers. And a couple of them said, you know, they started sentences with, "Oh, I was lucky because," and I know that perhaps that's quite a female thing as well, classing yourself as lucky and something that's happening to you by chance, where it's not luck, it's not by chance, it's the hard work that you've actually put in. You know, there was the lady, I'm pretty bad with names, I'm not going to remember their names, the lady that previously worked at Go Compare, I think it was, and she was talking about, one of her main clients now is somebody that she'd met sort of 7-8 years ago and had maintained a relationship with, and she knows that he's always going to talk about her and her business when he goes into other situations where it might be of relevance. And yeah, that was really interesting, because it made me think, as an entrepreneur, I'm thinking about, what new network shall I create? Not rather than, but as well as thinking, actually, what's the importance of the corporate network that I've already got and built up, and how can I take that with me along with my journey?
Yeah, so that was Kath Chadwick of Front Door Communications, who is ex-BBC and ex-Go Compare, as you say. And I think Kath would probably be the first to say that, yes, she's got a hefty dose of imposter syndrome, which, and as a former colleague of Kath's and a friend and a peer, I looking from the outside can safely say she didn't ought to have, because she is super talented. But that's the problem with imposter syndrome, isn't it? That it doesn't matter how talented we are, there's always that sort of little voice on the shoulder saying, you've only got here because you're lucky, you were in the right place at the right time, and all of that. And so I think that's what you heard reflected in the podcast. It comes back to something that I find with a lot of business founders, but absolutely particularly with female founders, is a lack of confidence, an inherent lack of confidence. And in fact, the Rose Review back in 2019, one of the major barriers that was highlighted was the fact that women felt that they didn't have the skills to start in business. And the key point there is that women felt they didn't have the skills. It isn't that they don't. It's totally a perception, it's like, I can't do that, I'm not going to be very good at that. And it's just a perception. And that is something that I think collectively we have to A, recognise, and B, help women in particular to overcome. And interestingly, I think that then links in with the maintaining and recognising the strength of your existing networks, because they will inevitably be your champions and they will be your sponsors. They might have been your sponsors in a corporate career, but you're right, you don't want to cut them loose, you don't want to cut them adrift. It's important to carry those through with you. And Kath was talking about somebody who was a great sponsor of hers, and as you say, has really helped propel her business and remains a really great supporter of hers, and the importance of having that. And I think sometimes you're right, starting a business is obviously a new chapter, but it doesn't necessarily erase everything that's come before it. We are all the sum of all of our parts, aren't we, in terms of all of that background. My career, for example, is very much a squiggly career, as I mentioned earlier, but it doesn't mean that I don't draw on elements that from my early days, and even people that I met in my very first role, even though on paper it looks like a totally different industry and different career now. And I think, to your point, it is really important to recognise that we can draw on networks and communities from across our lives and across our career, not just as I said earlier, not just go into that breakfast networking club that seems to be the in thing or the thing to do. It is about finding your tribe. So that's about people who you are comfortable with. Crucially, that you're comfortable with being honest with as well, and the people that will be there to pick you up on those times when it's not going so well, because that's inevitable, but they will be your champions as well. So building your tribe from your networks, which will be many and varied, is really important. And it's something as well that we see a lot on the Natwest Accelerator. So just to spell out a little bit about that for people who are unfamiliar, it is, as you mentioned, a 6-month fully funded program of support that's available for growth and scaling businesses. And it comes with the one-to-one business coaching that we've already talked about, a suite of workshops and content and events designed to upskill founders to help them to take their business to the next level. It comes with access to co-working spaces. So we have 14 co-working spaces around the UK. And for the time that you're on that program, you can work from those co-working spaces. The caveat to that is we also offer all of this via a virtual accelerator. So if you aren't within geographic distance of one of those 14 hubs, you can have the accelerator virtually, and that obviously comes without the co-working space. But for me, the magic in Accelerator comes from the community. So I'll be interested to hear what you think, but I have seen so many examples of businesses collaborating, sharing resource, sharing experience, giving each other a hand up, giving each other just a sounding board. So I always say that the magic happens within the community, and we onboarded a new cohort to Accelerator 2 weeks ago, and we start off with a 2-day event called Ignition, which, as you'll remember, is quite an intense but really exciting 2 days. And even by the start of the second day, I was starting to see that happen within the community. I was starting to see those sparks. I was starting to see the connections and the obvious synergies. And I think that's just absolutely priceless, because you can absolutely take your business to another level when you've got that around you.
Yeah, I would say that I would definitely agree with that. I think when I started the Accelerator back in September, I could see from the cohort that there were no other solicitors, no other lawyers on there. And I thought, I wonder how much, how much overlap there's going to be between our businesses and our experiences. Well, I mean, they're identical. Thoughts and problems and ideas and questions people had were exactly what was going through my mind. If I had a question, somebody had already had it and answered it and then share that with me. And actually, this year I've been lucky enough, and feels like tooting my own horn, but to be nominated for one of the startup awards in Wales.
Oh, fantastic. Well done.
Thanks. And I think there's 4 or 5 others from the cohort that have also been nominated in different categories. And I compare this to my experience this time last year when I went to the event, the awards ceremony. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any of the businesses. And then this year, I think I know 5 people that have been nominated. One of them I'm working with because he's helping me prepare an event in London. That's Rich from Venue.
Yeah.
I've got Sino Bounds, Charlotte, and she and her business now provides me with a virtual assistant, Danielle, who works with me, and Luke, who's now on the course. He's done some photography for me. And it's just all of a sudden you realize it almost has happened organically. All of a sudden I realize that I know all of these people and I'm working with their businesses.
Yeah, I know. That's powerful, isn't it? I think.
It almost like crept up on me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
My favorite story and my favorite example of that, and that sharing of resource and sharing a problem and coming up with a joint solution, it came from my predecessor in the role, who was walking through the Cardiff Accelerator Hub one day and saw 2 people on the cohort, one who ran an AI business and one lady who made Welsh cakes in her kitchen. And they were sitting down having a really in-depth conversation about marketing. And he said, where else would somebody in AI work with somebody who made cakes? And yet they had exactly the same issue. I mean, those sectors are poles apart, and the size of the businesses were very different as well. However, they both had the same fundamental problem with marketing, and they were working together to solve it. And I think that's where, it's really incongruous, but it absolutely worked. And to your point, you can make connections with people who will be useful to your business, like a photographer or videographer or whatever. But then there'll also be those chance conversations with people who, on the face of it, have no connection with the law. However, as you say, they might have already grappled with the sticky problem you've got at the moment, or vice versa. And that's where the beauty of it is, I think.
And I think a lot of it comes back to that confidence point as well, because confidence is so multifaceted. I would say that I'm a confident individual, but in aspects of the business, I'm not. And also in things that, for example, I was having a conversation with Louis, who I can't remember the name of his business, but he does the data in Google Ads.
Yeah, Web Marketer UK.
That's it. Thanks, Gemma. Sorry, I'm terrible at names and business names. And we were talking about a legal problem that he had as a business, having to potentially try and recover some debt. And I sort of said, oh, you've got you could go down the money claims online, and you could issue a claim online, you could do, and I sort of talked about it as if it was something that everybody would know. And he was like, no, hang on a second, I don't know what that is, rewind, like walk me through that. And I suppose it's someone flagging up, have confidence in that stuff that you think is really generic knowledge to somebody else is pure gold. They don't know that at all. And that's what they're looking, in a professional services industry, they're looking for you to advise them about that. So that was not a confidence boost, but that sort of flagged up that actually, because I'm used to being in an office full of solicitors where you could say money claims online and everybody would just go, yeah, that actually that's part of the professional service that I'm selling, that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so often business owners just assume that everybody, everyone can do that, or everyone's got that level of knowledge. And you're absolutely right, they haven't. But I think that it's important to recognize the flip side of that as well. And one of the things that we encourage business owners to recognize on the Accelerator program is actually it's okay to not know, and it's okay to not be good at everything, because nobody's good at everything. But when you start a business and you're on your own, or you've got a co-director, or maybe even a small team, the tendency is to try and do everything yourself, or think you ought to, and there will always be a weak point, whether it's understanding your figures, or whether it's knowing how to do your marketing, or it might be leadership or whatever, but there will always be something you're absolutely cracking at, which is why you've gone into the business in the first place, and then something that's your weakness or your weak spot, and that's fine. We actually say that, you know what, to recognize that and articulate that is actually a strength. Once you recognize it, you can do one of several things. You can either say, okay, right, I'm going to upskill and make sure that I can do that. Or you can say, okay, I acknowledge that's my weakness. I'm going to hire in. I'm going to get somebody in who can do that. Or I'm going to train a member of staff to do that. Or actually, I'm just going to outsource it. And that actually can really move your business forward when you get to the point when you accept, I'm not a jack of all trades. And actually, it's detrimental to try to be, because there will be some things you're not good at, and you will spend an inordinate amount of time trying to do them. So recognizing where those gaps are, and then, as I say, either upskilling somebody else, or outsourcing, is going to actually move you forward.
Yeah, no, that's a really valid point. And I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to take on a virtual assistant who is already doing an absolutely brilliant job of marketing an event that I've got coming up. So yes, that's been a great move. We had a couple of comments from Ashley, who's been watching here. Let me see if I can just click one of his comments up. So this is Ashley Lead. So Ashley said that the NatWest Business Accelerator really helped me get started in my business. So thank you to Gemma and her gang.
Oh, well, that's lovely to hear. Thank you, Ashley. Probably a good time to mention that, as we already talked about, it is a 6-month program, so it doesn't take a genius to work out we run that twice a year. And as I said, we have just onboarded a new cohort. So the next cohort will start in September across all our UK locations and online as well. It is a competitive process, so it is a case of applying and going through an interview. Those applications are likely to open in early June, with interviews then being carried out throughout the summer for a September start date. But if you Google NatWest Accelerator, you will find the Accelerator homepage, and there is a register your interest button. And if you fill in that short form, you will be notified when the application round opens. The application is really straightforward. It should take about 15 minutes. And the interview is also 15 minutes, which is an interesting one, because people tend to think it's going to be really sort of long and in-depth, and it's really not. What I always say is that we are looking for businesses with a strong growth trajectory. We are looking for businesses that are already trading it and either have turnover and or investment. But really what we're looking for is fire in the belly. So when I'm interviewing for Accelerator, I'm looking for somebody who knows what their growth plans are and that I can just tell is absolutely determined to get there.
Oh, fab. And I really enjoyed my 15-minute interview, and I've really enjoyed the 6 months I've done. And I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, going to get on for another 6 months in September.
Oh, great. Yeah, because you can do the program up to 3 times.
Gemma, that's going to bring us to the end of our time. Can I just say a massive thank you to you for coming on today, for talking about the Accelerator program and highlighting your brilliant podcast, which I would definitely recommend people to check out, the Inspiring Women Wales, and also for flagging up that event, which is going ahead. Remind us of the date again in the Llanech Vineyards.
So that is Friday, April the 21st in the morning at Llanech Vineyard, and it's called It's About Time.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'll be there, definitely. So thank you ever so much, Gemma.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. Bye now.